The issue that I'm addressing is how to analyze the effects of announcements about future policy, taking into account the fact that investors and other market participants that the central bank is addressing through its communications do think forward about the future consequences of, say, investment decisions they're making now. And the whole point of the policy is to affect behavior because of taking account of the fact that one thinks that people are forward-looking. But it's unrealistic, I think, to make the assumption that they have complete state contingent plans extending off, say, to the end of their life. Recent experiments with forward guidance are an example that make this an especially critical issue, because you have central banks using as a tool of policy statements not about what they're going to do immediately at all, but statements about policy relatively far in the future, perhaps years in the future. And that obviously only matters to the extent that you think that people in the economy are taking on board those announcements, changing the way they're thinking about the future. What I try to show is that it is possible to analyze, say, the effects of announcements about future policy in a way that takes account of the fact that people can do forward planning a certain distance into the future, but not all the way to the end. The modeling approach that I propose in the work that I'm going to talk about assumes that economic agents are like expert chess players or Go players. They do involve forward planning. They can do better by doing explicit forward planning, but they only analyze the consequences of possible moves looking forward a finite number of steps, but then they don't go further, and they instead have a judgment of how they feel about the situation that they imagine getting to this finite number of steps into the future. There are two particularly important conclusions from the alternative analysis that I propose. Rational expectations analyses of forward guidance have argued that if the central bank commits to keep nominal interest rates low for a very long time, or in the simplest case commits to keep them low permanently, that in a rational expectations equilibrium, a permanently low nominal interest rate would have to be associated with, in the long run, lower inflation rather than higher inflation. Authors have argued on the basis of this that commitments to keep nominal interest rates low for a long time ought to be expected to be deflationary rather than inflationary, and this is a perverse result which would imply the opposite of what central banks are trying to do with these policies. My analysis, which assumes only finite horizon forward planning, shows that one doesn't need to be afraid of that regardless of the length of the finite horizon forward planning, one should expect the policy to be expansionary and inflationary rather than deflationary. At the same time, my analysis fixes another problem with rational expectations analyses, which is the branch of the literature which has argued under the assumption of rational expectations that forward guidance should be extremely stimulative. And authors have found that if one commits to keep nominal interest rates low for very far into the future, that then these policies are predicted under rational expectations to have extremely strong effects on inflation and real activity that should occur immediately. My analysis implies that that would be true if people's planning horizons were far enough into the future, but that if they have shorter planning horizons, then the predicted effects, while of the same sign, are much more modest. So I think that it will be practically of great importance to central banks to use this kind of analysis that I'm proposing as opposed to traditional rational expectations analysis in considering the effects of forward guidance policies, both to not be worried about some apparently perverse effects that rational expectations analyses have suggested are possible, but also to have a more modest and realistic sense of what the likely benefits of forward guidance are and how much one can really lean on that policy instrument alone.